Thank you, Nawar. Our first session is a panel titled The Catalytic Power of Collectives, and it's a pleasure to welcome Ivet C, part of the collective What, How, and For Whom, Sofia Villena Araya, Deniz Kirkali, Amelie Wedel from Topsoil, and Mirwan Andan, member of Ruangrupa. This session will be moderated by Amal Khalaf, Director, Cubitt, Curator at Large, Public Practice, Serpentine and Sharjah Biennial 16, co-curator. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Amal, and it's a real honor to be here and on such an amazing panel, sharing the stage with very inspiring people. Firstly, thank you so much to Sheikh Ahour and Nawar and everybody at the Sharjah Art Foundation for creating this incredibly timely gathering. I feel like, especially in these moments of compounding crises and war, it's now more than ever urgent to create these gatherings that think about what it means to be together, to think in complexity, to acknowledge our interdependence, and think about ways that and center practices that have been holding space for these conversations in the arts for a really long time, so we can learn together. I wanted to just start with a little poem before we begin the panel. It's from a poet called Sonia Sanchez, and I found it in a book by Jackie Wang called Carceral Capitalism. Our bodies are not closed loops. We hold each other and keep each other in time by marching, singing, embracing, breathing. We synchronize our tempos so we can find a rhythm through which the urge to live can be expressed collectively. And in this way, we set the world into motion. In this way, poets become the timekeepers of the revolution. As a curator and an art worker, I think a lot about what it means to work together. From doing union organizing, working with artistic collectives, and also commissioning collective processes with within artistic and pedagogical commissions. And I'm really committed, like many people here, to undoing harmful, extractive, neoliberal, and hierarchical ways of working that is so prevalent in the arts field. And I've really been inspired by the people I'm sharing the stage with today in the way that they have been, challenging these hierarchical models and holding space actually for different ways of working with each other, but also for other artists and practices to be working in ways that maybe other contexts and institutions wouldn't create space for. So I'm going to introduce these representatives of three curatorial collectives, and then they'll each be sharing presentations, and hopefully we'll have a little discussion together and then maybe have time to invite conversation with all of you in the audience. So I'm joined today by Ivet C from What, How, and For Whom, or VAHV. Ivet C is a curator and a member of What, How, and For Whom, a curatorial collective formed in 1999 and based in Zagreb, Vienna, and Berlin. The focus of her curatorial interest is the potential of self-organization within the expanded realm of contemporary art, relations of art, and social change, questions of collectivity, internationalism, education, and cultural geopolitics. VAHV, the three basic, what, how, and for whom, are the three basic questions of every economic organization. And it was the name of a project dedicated to the 152nd anniversary of the Communist Manifesto in Zagreb in 2000. It became the motto and title of the Vaheve Art Collective. Since 2003, Vaheve have been organizing production, exhibition, and publishing projects, as well as running the program for Gallery Nova in Zagreb. In 2018, Vaheve launched an independent international study program for emerging artists called Vaheve Academia, based in Zagreb. So I'm very excited to hear from Ivet. We're also joined by Topsoil. We have with us Deniz Kirkali and Amelie Wedel, and hopefully Sofia will be joining us within the presentations, coming directly from the airport. So Topsoil is a transnational curatorial and research collective formed in London in 2017 by Sofia Villena Araya, Deniz Kirkali, and Amelie Wedel. Based in San Jose, Istanbul, and Berlin, the founders seek to bring into dialogue their various contextual and disciplinary perspectives, pursuing learning through friendship. In prolonged conversation, the founders discuss how to work and think with each other, prioritizing care and sensibility, as well as drivers of their research and practice. They initiate long-term collaborative research projects with thinkers and practitioners outside Topsoil to collect methods and tools that help them move towards a shared goal while still being attentive to specificities. Topsoil practices self-publishing as a kind of transnational curatorial practice. The collective received a scholarship from the School of Commons in Zurich last year and has participated in events at cultural spaces like Vierte Welt in Berlin. And finally, last but not least, we have Mirwan Andan from the amazing Ruangrupa with us. Thank you for coming in just at the last minute. We can take a breath before your presentation. Mirwan Andan is the artistic director and co-founder of Ruangrupa. He is also part of the Jakarta-based art collective Ruangrupa, who are the artistic directors of Documenta 15. Founded in 2000, Ruangrupa is a collective based in Jakarta. As a nonprofit organization, Ruangrupa promotes artistic ideas within urban and cultural context through the involvement of artists and other disciplines such as the social sciences, politics, technology, and the media, so as to open up critical reflection and perspectives on contemporary urban problems in Indonesia. The Indonesian word Ruangrupa loosely translates to art space or spatial form. Ruangrupa organizes community art projects such as exhibitions, festivals, art labs, workshops, and research projects. They also produce books, magazines, and publications. Their work is based on holistic, social, spatial, and personal practice that's rooted in Indonesian culture, where friendship, solidarity, and community are of central importance. So now I'm going to pass the mic to Ivet, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to all your presentations. Thank you all.
Now it's working, yeah? Working? No? Working now? We do that, yes. Thank you. And maybe I can, let's see if I can get the presentation up. Yes, thank you. So What, How, and For Whom is a curatorial collective of 4 women. With me, Ana Devic, Nataša Ilić, Sabina Sabolović, and we have been working together for almost 25 years now. For the most part, our activities are based in Zagreb, Croatia. However, since 2019, Nataša Ilić, Sabina Sabolović, and me have been working as artistic directors of Kunsthalle Wien in Vienna, and I will talk at the very end of the presentation about that a bit as well. Our program there will last altogether 5 years until this summer, when we return to Zagreb, where our activities continued all the time led by Anna. Four of us started working together in the aftermath of the war in former Yugoslavia, and we found each other more based on our politics than based on our love of art, I would say. From the beginning of our work, we attempted to question a wide range of issues related to transition from socialist to capitalist model, and to a number of its ugly side effects that determine Croatian society, as well as the rest of the states that were formed as a result of breakup of Yugoslavia. More than 30 years have passed since the beginning of the processes of this so-called transition, and the deindustrialization, ethno-nationalism, the interference of religion in education, public space and policy, the dismantling of public goods and commons through corrupt privatizations and outright plunder, and exodus of population remain constant. When establishing VHV in Zagreb at the end of the 1990s, our work was rooted in this political and social landscape, a place of post-war intensity, filled with xenophobia, nationalism, and the erasure of the socialist past. Contemporary art and exhibitions offered us space to think and act against that, working with different value systems, establishing forgotten international and regional relations, digging up subjects that were swept under the carpet, initiating and participating in numerous networks and collaborative projects. We decided to form a collective as a politically inspired decision, and after more than 2 decades, we still cherish the space of dialogue, exchange, support, and learning that this collective of 4 women enables. Starting from the belief that art has a significant role in rethinking and reshaping how society is experienced, conceptualized, and organized, we developed the methodology that puts together exhibition practice, historical research, and innovative discursive and media formats. Our goal was first and foremost to support art, but also to examine ways in which art institutions and their protocols contribute to shaping subjectivities and public discourses. This was all in the close dialogue with one of our core interests, this notion of collectivity, and we believe this is an issue that can be explored in different contexts and constellations. We believe that through our collectivity, we can insist on new models of shared infrastructure, on spaces for reciprocity, conviviality, and responsible togetherness. And we believe that despite all the controversies, this notion of collectivity continues to be important for the art world, offering a model for necessary rethinking of familiar curatorial and managerial mechanism of institutions. To make things a bit less abstract, I will briefly touch upon some projects and initiatives that we envisioned either as an attempt of intervention into local or international contexts. So what you see behind me is actually the cover of the publication we produced as a result of our very first show in 2000, which was called What, How, and For Whom, and this is where we got our name from. So What, How, and For Whom on the occasion of 152nd anniversary of Communist Manifesto. It was supposed to happen on the 150th anniversary. It was a bit late, and we joked it was, all the communist planning, it was always lagging behind. All those 5 years plans never were really happening, So what, how, and for whom, the 3 basic questions of every economic organization concern the planning, concept, and realization of exhibitions, as well as production and distribution of artworks and the artist's position in the labor market. These questions formed the title of our first project, became the motto of our work, and the title of the collective. The project was one of the first cultural initiatives that involved artists from different republics of former Yugoslavia in the aftermath of the 1990s war. And after a decade of suppression, it opened a discussion on the positive legacies of socialist system in the public sphere and on the shifting of the public role of art in the times of transition. So this is the building where it took place, which is the home of the Croatian Art Association of the Croatian Artists. It's the one of the one of the historically most Latin buildings in Zagreb. I'm trying to move it, but yes, which has a colloquial name, the mosque. I mean, the building was built between the two world wars as home of the Croatian artist. It was a present of the Yugoslav king at the time to the city of Zagreb. Then, during the Second World War, it was actually the mosque. When Croatia, which was at the time a Nazi state, had aspirations towards Bosnia, it tried to say that Muslim population in Bosnia was actually also kind of Croatian, and this was when the mosque was built. When minarets were built, they were torn down after the Second World War, and the mosque was turned into Museum of the Revolution. This is one of the works in this first exhibition that actually shows the frescoes that were installed in the Museum of the Revolution during the socialist time and then walled after in the 1990 when Croatia became the independent state. So we are doing it 10 years after the conflict. This is one of the works in the public space. A bit of the works of the show. Another project that I wanted to talk about, it's Written Off, dedicated to the 20th anniversary of Operation Storm, which was done in collaboration with Public Library Project. This is the celebration of the Operation Storm, official celebration. So 20-year anniversary of the end of the war in Croatia. That was in 95, so the exhibition happened in 2015. And during the Operation Storm, between 100,000 and 150 people, the numbers are contested, left the country in the course of like a week or two in the refugee columns. And the public library, the collective with whom we worked is an ongoing hybrid media and social project initiated by Marcel Mars and Tomislav Medak in 2012. Based on the ideas from open source software movement. What they do is build a repository of digitized books and enable others to do as well in order to thematize the idea of public library as an institution offering universal knowledge to each member of the society. What we did in this exhibition that was called Written Off on the occasion of 20th anniversary of the storm was an exhibition action organized in Gallery Nova in Zagreb as a collaborative effort. It took place in early summer of 2012 and 15, and it was timed to coincide with the media frenzy surrounding the official celebration of the 20-year anniversary of the Operation Storm, which marked the official end of the civil war in Croatia, which is also officially called the Homeland War. And it's actually forbidden by law to question the notion of the Homeland War. During the Civil War and after the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s, several hundreds of thousands of books were removed from public, school, factory, and special libraries, socio-political organizations, and private collections in Croatia due to ideologically undesirable content, the Cyrillic letters they were written in, or ethnic or political background of the authors. They were thrown into rubbish, discarded out into the street, destroyed or recycled. During the exhibition, the citizens were invited to bring the books that were thrown out of the public libraries in the 90s to the gallery so that they could be scanned and later on available on a site by the exhibition. Apart from the documentary materials on the book destruction, books brought in by citizens and scanners for their digitalizations, we also organized a series of performances that offered different approaches to looking into complicated relationship between the individual and officially sanctioned reading. Written Off on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the storm was called Written Off because media and official politics often presented removal and destruction of books as a legitimate and routine procedure of writing off books from the libraries, although this was often combined with statements about unwanted books written in Cyrillic letters, described as ideologically unacceptable, dangerous, harmful, unnecessary. Arguing differently, written off placed book destruction in the social context, where destruction of the desirable and unsuitable monuments and books happened simultaneously with destructions of houses and killing of undesirable and unsuitable citizens outside and regardless to war operations. The official stated discourse celebrates an operation that resulted in deaths and expulsion of its citizens of different ethnicity. And in opposition to this, the exhibition at Gallery Nova drew attention to the question that anniversary of Storm actually opened up. Power overwriting the history, ethno-nationalism as other phases of neoliberalism, character of the war and justice and its aftermath. It refused to accept the rhetoric of war and existence of the enemy as the basic condition of creating the Croatian nation. And it opposed the discourse that positions the war crimes against civilians of wrong nationality as justified and a need for this historically irrefutable. So this is the card that denotes access to the site. This was the scanner within the show. Okay, now I'm going a bit further to a next project that we did that I wanted to briefly talk about, that is called My Sweet Little Lamb. Everything we see could also be otherwise. That was a series of exhibition that in 6 chapters that took place over 2 years in Zagreb. And it was also envisioned as a very kind of a strong intervention in local context, because it was a time when there was a very strong and very radical right-wing government in Croatia that threatened with pulling all the funding for cultural initiatives, closing of the independent spaces. So together with the Contact collection that is based in Vienna and curator Katrin Romberg, we envisioned this project as an intervention and series of exhibition in independent spaces around the city. In artist studios, small independent spaces, the project worked as an ongoing display machine, and through its dense rhythm and inclusion of various small initiatives in the city, it directly addressed the shrinking of public space and the attack on the cultural institution by this right-wing government at the time. This is a private apartment in which part of the exhibition took place. This is the Gallery Nova, one of the chapters. This is the Tomislav Gotovac Institute, one of the venues, which is some of the works. This is again the big building from the beginning, where the final exhibition of the show took place. And what we also wanted to do is very much try to connect, stress these intergenerational links, so connect the newly produced works with the seminal work by artists from Central, Eastern, and Southeast Europe from the 60s to present. So really to put together and juxtapose these different generations together. This is the performance that was done by Sanja Ivejković at the first exhibition that I was talking about, and then reenacted in this show. To finish with our activities in Zagreb, I would just like to touch briefly upon the Svehave Academia as an independent, tuition-free, interdisciplinary study program that we started in 2018. We are at the moment starting with the 6th generation. It is an intervention in the field of art education, aiming to enable new forms of self-determination for the participants based on model of critical reflection, curiosity, and encounter among artists, artworks, art professionals, scholars, and practitioners in various disciplines. And it departs from the notion of the conscious citizen, aiming to offer a broad educational spectrum and access to conflicting ideas and opinions. So every year we accept 10 to 12 fellows, and we offer them full tuition to spend to spend a year with us and with the various professors that we invite to Zagreb. This specificity of our initial work is being deeply rooted in the local context, and this makes us curious about the place where we work. We always link our exhibitions and programs to local communities, listening and learning about what matters in certain place and for people there. We seek to build upon the knowledge and experience that already exist and hone them with the tools we have at hand. From the very beginning of our work, we were also aware of the importance of internationalism and building relations with other places, and these twin forces continue to be driving forces of our project, making us always look for allies and connections near and far. As a kind of a bridge to what we do in Vienna, I wanted to really briefly touch upon the project we did in collaboration with Tarek Abou El Fatou, who invited us to do it in 2013 and 14. This was a project called Meeting Points, 10,000 Vals and 100,000 Drinks. It was the 7th edition of Meeting Points, a multidisciplinary festival focusing on contextual presentations of art from the Arab world. It was organized in several cities of Europe, Asia, and the Arab world, so Zagreb, Antwerp, Cairo, Hong Kong, Beirut, Vienna, and Moscow. It was organized during the popular uprising that shook the Arab world to its foundations in 2011, and at the time when several social movements around the world fueled the public debate on existing social and economic order. And we wanted to also do this festival in a way that we always try to do, to move away, to break these regional and national, let's say, boundaries, and to step out of the Arab world. And this is why we, together with Tarek, discussed and actually did exhibitions in Antwerp, Moscow, and Vienna as well. I will just go briefly through some images of the different shows, because I feel I'm running a bit out of time. So not, 10,000 Wiles and 100,000 Tricks, it's a quote from Wretched of the Earth, written by Frantz Fanon in 2061, as a reflection on Algeria's liberation from French colonial rule. As an exhibition title, it referred indirectly to Fanon's analysis of the passage from colonialism to neo-colonialism, but also used his insight to assess the role of middle classes in today's movements and configurations, including us, the new globalized class of artists, curators, and intellectuals. This is Moscow, and now I am at Kunsthalle, and I will talk very briefly. So Kunsthalle is actually one of the biggest institutions for production and presentation of contemporary art in Europe, which is a space that doesn't have a collection. It's located in one of the richest cities in the world, in Vienna, which is actually on all these strange lists of best places in the world to live in the world, often, listed as the first, together with Melbourne and Zurich, I guess. And when we applied, because at the moment, obviously, there was an opening in the city, city politics. There was when the public call for the new director was published, it says collectives are invited to apply. We said, let's give it a try, and we were surprised ourselves to have gotten this job for 5 years. What we proposed is to create a program that is strongly linked to the present social and political movement, starting from the unique geopolitical position of Vienna as a former imperial city. That was, of course, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire that was ruling half of the Europe for several centuries, but also a city where almost 50% of citizens are of foreign origin, and this is official statistics. Official statistics says that 42% of people living in Vienna are of foreign origin. So we aimed at repositioning the institution, grounding it into this landscape of diverse migrant Vienna. And we wanted also to draw attention that other major cultural institutions are not dealing with this fact at all. We opened the institution to the diversity of our artists and topics, and we drew strength from queer feminist, anti-fascist, and decolonizing ideas. We focused on building relationships and supporting artists through new productions. And our program aimed at questioning and deconstructing the Western canon, both in art history and in contemporary art, offering new narratives as well as new forms of collaboration and institutional engagement with the city. Also, one of our programmatic, so I will go briefly, this is our first show that we did, that was called Bread, Wine, Cars, Security and Peace. It opened in 2020, literally 2 days before pandemic. So we didn't really have good luck with moving to Vienna. This exhibition actually was really trying to be in dialogue with this, what I was mentioning, this best city for living in the world title that Vienna had. And looked into ways in which the notion of good life operates through exclusion across different international contexts. This is also a quote from Lebanese writer Bilal Kbeis, so of bread, wine, cars, security and peace. When Bilal Kbeis wrote in 2000, he described the unattainable dream of a good life for people in the global south, in contrast to the Western world, who dream of bread, wine, cars, security, and peace. Some other shows, really briefly. This is all from this first show. Then also what we did, I don't know how to go back. It doesn't matter. So once I'm forward, obviously. One of the things that we also did is we opened up the institution to a lot of guest curators. We felt it's really important not to curate only ourselves or curators in the house. So we invited people to come to Vienna and provide new perspective, new visions. So the curators whom we invited to do the shows included, for example, Miguel Lopez, Zdenka Badovina, Sovolder Mishoglu. This was really, so Zdenka, for example, Zdenka Badovina curated the show that we see now, which is a show by Sanja Ivejković. However, I mean, in general, we in this relatively short period, and despite the fact that this pandemic, I think we managed to position Kunsthalle as a different kind of cultural public space in Vienna, with a clear position in favor of marginalized groups. As I said, we drew strength from feminist, anti-fascist, and decolonizing in the ideas, and we feel this program was very needed in Vienna. However, we feel there was also a great reception by the artistic community. But of course, there were also difficulties, which were clearly manifested in the fact that continuation of our program for another term of 5 years was rejected by the city of Vienna. And we feel that this rejection of our program was a part of the broader ideological consolidation that is happening across Europe as an extremely uncreative response to multiple crises that we are witnessing. And we feel that this constellation asks for a serious political commitment to support this unsettling of the Western canon and addressing the role of the rich Western Europe, Vienna including, at this time. And this support we obviously didn't have. We also believe that what we wanted to do, create a generous, open institution that cares less about its own image and status and shares more of their resources and power with the artistic community, was also not so well received. And this is not an easy task to do. I mean, building new relationship, it's not an easy task. It's not that one can say, we are open institution and then suddenly everybody, comes in. It's something that it's really, really difficult and slow process. It requires hard work, mediation, and it requires that all parts of the institution are actually involved in that: curatorial, communication, publishing, education, but also so-called technical departments. And this is something that we learned, maintenance, accounting. In Austria, there is something that is called Four Eyes Principle, which means, the business director and the artistic directors are the very same level. And I'm not opposed to that in principle. Nobody should have unchecked power. But what actually happens is that the artistic and the management functions are completely divorced and not really in synchronicity. And this is also one thing that we'll learn. You can't build an open institution based on exclusive efforts of only so-called artistic departments. It really has to be an effort of the whole institution. And it's a hard process, and it's always a bit of a fight. And also, to build the trust in art, in contemporary art in general, and to build a trust between artistic and activist and communities. There are many factors need to be examined, and this cannot happen fast. We believe we managed to do a lot in these 5 years, but we also believe it was a process we just started, and it would have to continue also by us and by the whole field.
Hello. So my name is Deniz. I'm a part of Topsoil. It looks like Sofia is going to be late, so it will be me and Amelie talking, and let's see if she's going to be able to join us for the discussion. So Amal briefly introduced, but Topsoil is a transnational curatorial and research collective that the three of us has founded in 2017 in London. And now we're all based in different countries and continents, actually. But there's a very clear image in my mind from 2017. The three of us are sitting on the floor of Amelie's living room in East Dulwich in South London after a long breakfast and talking about topsoil. We're trying to name our collective, a task which took us a very long time and turned out to be a quite important negotiation process, and thinking about our first curatorial project, for which we got a little bit of funding from Goldsmiths University at the time, and we're trying to understand what it is that we'd like to do together as a collective. This mental image is a great representation of how we first gathered and how worked since then, collectively. And since then, a lot has changed. For instance, we haven't seen each other physically since the pandemic hit. And but we made it a priority to recreate these intimate, joyful, and relaxed settings where we meet one another and think together for extended periods of time. We met in London in 2017 when we were doing our MAs in Contemporary Art Theory in Goldsmiths University, and spent a year seeing exhibitions, meeting artists at pubs, going to talks, and overall feeling extremely stimulated, but also overwhelmed by the institutional setting we were in and things we were being confronted with. This also includes long months of UCU, university, and college trade union strikes that started in February 2018 and took place in universities across the UK. It somehow still continues. And it became an important, yet a very different arena of collectivity for us. And we often say it was an important setting where we setting where we learned a lot about what it means to gather physically together. I remember those long conversations we had and how we were trying to give sense to it all and see if things, thoughts, ideas, and interests stick to each other. And yes, what can we do with, and if yes, what can we do with this? We decided we wanted to work together, and the first real question we asked ourselves was, how do we work together, and how do we learn from one another? And it is safe to say this is one of the main questions at the core of our collective work still. In 2018, in a space called Safe House, which I believe no longer exists in London, we curated a group exhibition, a 3-day exhibition and events program titled Make It Hot, Cool It Down, Turn It Over, with artists Daniel Keller, Miriam Nye, Daisy Paris, Alex Pierce, and Rafal Zashko. The program included a music performance, a soundscape, a listening space, a food event with skipped food from the new Covent Garden Market, a fermentation workshop, a performative reading group, and an extensive screening program. The project invited things to come together in a pile. So rather than an exhibition about compost, we asked, what would an exhibition be as compost? The notion of the compost came about as we were interested in inviting other collaborators and collectives from which we could learn without necessarily bringing them together under a thematic unity. It was an initial effort at expanding our notion of collectivity and collaboration. What holds together a collective, or what brings it together initially? How we came to the idea of the compost cannot be thought separately from the context that we were in at the time. We were introduced to information and theoretical discourses prominent at the time in London, such as Donna Haraway's notion of the compost. We wanted to see how a concept that we had been talking about and had studied extensively could manifest as artistic and curatorial practices. Compost helps us to think about the process of coming together and engaging in a messy, hybrid, and porous conversation. We were struck by the fact that compost was as much about composition, putting together, as it is about decomposition, and thus taking apart. In a pile, there's always loose contact, engaged dissent, tender touch, and hostile rejection. During those 3 days, the house in Peckham was an active, living, hot compost pile where the certain things worked and others didn't, where we were investigating how we come together with multiple others. The space was always crowded, a bit run down and smelly, somehow messy and all in all quite intense. The works were also part of this general feeling. For instance, Rafal had tried something new for the first time. He invited visitors to chew gums in the space and stick them on his sculptures. There were cabbages, potatoes, leeks that were parts of the works. It was a quite experimental space for many people. For instance, Alex Pierce had asked a musician that he long admired and never dared to ask to perform together to perform with them, which ended up in a very loud and eccentric sound performance. There are some images from the performance. It was the first time we curated something together, and one of the biggest learnings was that the question of how we work together would become central to all of our projects, though every time with different constellations, under different conditions and needs, and with our changing needs. And that themes or concepts are more replaceable and change with the people we collaborate with and our transforming interests. Therefore, rather than starting off with a preliminary research question, we approach a constellation of inputs to search after this question of how to be and work together. So we're working through and from our relationship, finding our alternative ways, models, methodologies to ask this question and look for answers with other collaborators. And when looking back at our conflicting thoughts and feelings about our experience within academia and in an institutional learning setting, which includes stimulation, inspiration, imagination, but also frustration and what we thought these spaces lacked, we remember fondly how much we like to create those moments of learning from each other through talking about contemporary art and events and exhibitions, and how we kept chasing that intensity in all of our conversations. And this search was carried on to studio visits we had with many artists, most of whom were also doing their MFAs at the time at Goldsmiths, and the trust we sort of built for each other. We wanted to understand what could be helpful or interesting to them to do as part of this compost, and their openness in sharing their own experience in an institution, their needs and hesitations was also an important aspect of figuring out what kind of convivial spaces and encounters we are interested in building as a collective. Noticing that an important part of learning for us was happening at pubs, after seminars or convivial spaces that we were creating for ourselves, we started questioning this gap between the rather institutional and alternative knowledge production happening. During 2018, after our program at Goldsmiths had finished, we all three eventually moved away from London. Since 2019, our work has happened across many miles of distance, with the Atlantic Ocean in between and with an important time difference. Amelie is currently based in Berlin, I'm based between Istanbul and London, and Sofia is based in San Jose, Costa Rica. This is the first time the three of us reunite since then. So our work in 2019 really had to do with understanding physical distance, understanding what it meant to be in three different cities with their respective weather, culture, language, while also exploring the digital tools that were mediating our friendship from that moment on. This was a year before the pandemic had hit, so it is important to recognize that this was not a moment when everyone's ways of working had to be online yet. We tend to think spatially and environmentally as well as bodily about collectives, in the sense that we're concerned with how spaces feel and how that feeling affects the coming together of people. I guess this is part of our curatorial thinking. We're not only concerned with how artworks exist and dialogue within spaces, but also how bodies move and exchange within spaces and within specific conditions. However, this made sense while being together in the same city, but when Zoom or WhatsApp became our main interface, a question opened for us in terms of how to incorporate these as part of our curatorial understanding while exploring other possible interfaces across distance. The first collective online process we had is gathered in the zine, titled Rising Below the Surface. Small publications or zines were introduced as part of our collective and curatorial work online, and to this day, they continue to be essential tools. Additionally, a realization about the prevalence of affect and search for intimacy came through the process of working in our first zine. Because we weren't together physically, it became harder to read and understand each other's bodies. And this bodily understanding was quite important for us, and we took it for granted while being in the same city together. But digital encounters surfaced the need to make explicit the bodily experience. During the meetings for the zine Rising Below the Surface, it seemed the only moment we came in contact was when we realized that we have been misunderstanding each other all along. So we asked each other why to look at affects only until frustration and conflict appeared. If it is not through frustration, how else can we bring a bodily quality into our online encounters? With this question, we became more experimental and insistent to make communication channels work for us, to really allow for a sense of intimacy rather than leaving us existing in parallel worlds. While doing this first zine, it was clear that our needs have shifted because of this new online reality. And I want to emphasize this word shifting because I think we got quite excited with shifting as a practice. How can we rehearse shifting with a diversity of needs, environments, conditions, and actors? With this first zine, we also realized homework doesn't work for us. We are not interested in individually making work for our collective, but what we are interested in is in practice coordination, this flexibility and capacity and responsibility towards each other, towards the changing conditions of our lives, and towards our fundamental but also just transient needs.
Hello, does it work? Yes, perfect. And this thing, okay, everything. Yeah, so that's the moment when we were in that process of learning how to make the online space close and more intimate. And this led us to examine the notion of learning and pedagogy through two new projects. One was experimental pedagogies and the other one laboratory to learn how to talk to plants. This question regarding collective learning felt even more relevant at the time because it was a moment when we all started our PhDs respectively in the cities like Deniz continued at Goldsmiths, me in Ruhr University in Germany, and Sofia does her PhD in Costa Rica. So how university education, and kind of like, going back to university, varies from context to context, also entered our discussions. To think closely about learning and the ways we truly want to learn with others also became a tool for us to negotiate with the new main university architecture that was framing our individual academic research. Through these two projects, we got closer to finding intimate methods of learning together across disciplines. So it was really about finding new methods. We incorporated values, sensibilities, and tools. So one of these tools or like methods we invented was guided meditations. And that is to meet in an imaginary space at each online meeting. We would one of us would propose a meditation to, meet in a mental space. And an aspect of our practice is precisely this kind of place-making or space-making. And this for us is a way also of, thinking of what curatorial work is. So what are we making a place for? Through which kind of architecture do we make space for what matters? Another tool we introduced was rhythms in order to establish phases of different speeds, states of minds, and needs. And then we also invented something we call impulses, where we take turns to share a variety of materials and questions out of a place of just pure excitement and without the weight of expertise, just of sincere curiosity, something that had struck us in our, very respective personal surroundings. So these impulses, they have more to do with associative, diverse, and divergent knowledge. And again, I think the desire to shift is evident through these methods. Our coherence as a collective has to do with a compromise with our own plural sense of curiosity and learning needs, and not necessarily with well-defined topics. So we intentionally leave themes as open as possible. And the third method is maps, like all of these methods, again, as part of our online meetings. And we were not only inspired by maps as geographical tools, but also by thinkers such as Fernand Deligny, who's a psychiatrist actually, and a social researcher. And he translated maps into cognitive, communicative, and pedagogical experiences. His question was how maps work when verbal communication is not possible. And for us, maps are more of a way of going wherever we want to go with thinking, while being able to trace and retrace our steps. So here is an example of retracing back our online meetings and processes. So in this sense, we practice inductive learning, as we don't start from a general premise, but we come to an understanding as we are doing, documenting, and later looking back. And it is also a practice of doing while thinking. So, and then finding for us these kind of methodologies made us also more confident than to start sharing them with other people and to open our encounters to other actors. Through Laboratory to Learn How to Talk with Plants, we collaborated with Ecuadorian artist, researcher, and gardener Desiree Corral. And we approached her because we found her practice interesting as someone who has an artistic practice working with plants and finding ways of creatively relating to them. So kind of this question like how to learn from plants. And we realize how important it is to also make space to others' desires to experiment with how and from whom we learn. Desiree proposed us to embark on an attempt to converse with plants, and we got quite excited by this proposal, as I think it brought us back to the idea of compost and collectives. Collectives for us are not only defined by human or non-human actors, but actually by how an array of affects, environments, practice, rhythms, cognitive structures, and textures negotiate a togetherness across different scales. So then after these 2 years of experimenting, and also through online meetings and publishing these scenes amongst the three of us, but also with invited guests, we realized that we often come back to this question of vulnerability and trust in relation to knowledge production. We were really able to observe how our thinking was different depending on respective environments, practices, and people, and that thinking works differently in caring and trusting relationships. So we felt friendship was maybe a good place from which we could create alternative ways of learning together. And we therefore decided to delve more into the question of friendship as a research methodology. What could friendship as research mean? And what are the implicit strategies and methodologies of care in friendships that allow to exchange and think differently? And then this also is combined with the question, is it possible or even desirable to transform these methodologies into accountable, involved, and effective learning practices with others? So in order to address these questions, we connected with other collectives to share insights about collaborative work. And in 2022, we became part of this initiative called School of Commons. It is an international community learning space, which is based at the Zurich University of Arts in Switzerland, but it takes place mostly online, so we could all participate from our respective cities. School of Commons is a 10-month-long program, and that brings together artists, researchers, designers, activists, to really to engage with each other's work and to think about the production and mediation of knowledge together. It's interesting that there is no really predetermined program. It's more like a structure of meetings. And then there's a final presentation in Zurich where Deniz and I had the possibility to create a workshop which we called Scores for Conviviality. And with our project at School of Commons, our intention was to research how other participating collectives were coming up with ways of working together. So the questions were how do they spend time together? What kind of practices of intimacy do they engage in? And the question was also how do we as Topsoil encounter these collectives through our understanding of care? So what is a caring encounter? We asked 4 collectives to, so these are images from the online meetings with School of Commons participants. And then we asked 4 collectives to meet us for an online conversation because we felt maybe this more 101 interaction would give us more clues about their practice. And we met with Just Listening, How to Love Many in Many Ways, Pantarei and Ubo Enye. And we met the artists and collectives really without actually knowing where this project itself would go, without a concrete research agenda. But it was important for us to really have this intention of openness and curiosity to allow for the encounters to idiosyncratically change from one group to the other. After our conversations with these collectives, we as Topsoil discussed questions of what we learned and how we could actually document it. And you saw, this is an important question for us, how to document these kind of more elusive conversations that we have. And of course, we touched upon many topics with these collectives and also very based on their projects. But what we realized is that we really kept on talking about what our feeling was when we were spending time with these collectives. With each participating collective, there was this something present yet elusive that we wished to learn from them. Something that had struck us about how they worked, conversed, and thought differently. And we called this something that we were feeling, we called that equality. And we think of these qualities as research practices. To be a bit more specific, with Ubo Enye, the encounter gave a sense of time just being endless, that we could speak forever and that there was no boundary, thoughts could go anywhere. With How to Love Many in many ways, it was remarkable how analytical they were towards their collaboration. They were really sharp in understanding like what they do, their frameworks, their differences, and they were really much engaged in this practice of self-reflexivity. Together with the people of just listening, the quality that most struck us was patience. And since their practice is based on listening, it really gave the sense of attentiveness and appreciation when we met them. Our meeting with Pantarei was very interesting as they work in the field of architecture, and we realized like how this work that they're doing is quite different to how we work. Their processes are informed by participating in competitions, by meeting strict deadlines, by creating effective divisions of labor. But it was also at the same time very beautiful to see how much joy they were getting out of precisely this thing of like meeting deadlines and accomplishing a project. And just one thing that I find interesting is that like with all like these qualities that we felt that they were somehow a relationship to time and like how these practices are spending time, and maybe that's something that we can also discuss later. And also for this project we created a little pamphlet that we published together with Humdrum Press, and based on conversations, associations, drawings, and creating exercises, we as Topsoil created this visual documentation as a way to slowly tease out what we learned from the participating collectives and also what we want to integrate into our own practice, because we really find that learning, that there is this transformative aspect in it and also understand ourselves as like porous and be transformed through our relationships with others. I remember in one of the meetings we spoke with Gabriel Hensche and Angie Mosen about what constitutes a collective and about the struggle with questions of relevance and production, as Gabriel put it. He referred to certain standards that are imposed from outside and that eventually start to inform the work process. A demand to institutionalize as a collective in order to be taken seriously, to get funding, to prove the relevance of one's project and having to show that one produces an outcome for the greater public. And I think for us, friendship as research is precisely about having to struggle with these questions while doing the work of creating habits that point towards lightness and joy. So friendship as a research practice is about being attentive and keeping in touch with this horizon of honesty and care, and then to work from there. And I think it's important to understand that this does not mean to avoid heavy things. In fact, there are situations in which looking for a quality of joy enabled us to confront complex, constraining, and difficult matters, and ultimately to meet each other in all the existing differences. To sum up, there are a few solutions that we found for our specific situation that work for us. So one of them is that we don't focus on a theme. We try to avoid homework. We are forgiving about missing deadlines or meetings. We let go of expectations more easily. We listen closely. We value encounters without a concrete agenda. We pay attention to our bodies, and we change rhythms. Friendship as a research practice for us is about attentiveness to these seemingly minor gestures. Sorry. So it's like friendship as research is really to look at these minor gestures, and all of them are ongoing practices. That means that we really don't own them, but we really feel like we are constant have to work on be attentive to them. In another meeting, we spoke to Pule from Ubung Enye, who said that in group formations there are these forces to break or to pull the group apart. And I think that was a very interesting or deep understanding that there are all these different forces that make our collective work heavier, but that we put energy in finding ways to create pulls towards each other and finding ways to stay light and yet connected. And we could call that like a practice of staying in touch across distance. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, you first.
Oh, it's okay.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wabihi nasta'inu ala umuri dunia wa din fastabiqul khairat. Thank you so much for the team of March meeting, Hur and the team, the amazing team of Sharjah Art Foundation who's been organizing this March, the many March meeting we have been attending. So I use the present continuous tense because it's being present perfect continuous tense because it's been done in the past time, it's being done now, and then it will be continued, hopefully forever. So thank you so much for this invitation to invite Ruangrupa to be part of this. To be part of this early morning discussion on what collectivity is, and then when the team of March meeting sent us something like terms of reference, and then we found this word tawassujat, which is really rings a bell in our mind. As you might know that we are coming from a country with more than 250,000 million population, with the majority of population are Muslims, and then we were born and raised in this culture of listening to the Arabic word. We listen to 5-time azans every day, and then this tawassujat really rings a bell. When it comes to sharing ideas, intertwining, and then in a discussion to prepare or to plan to work together, really much like lumbung, if some of you may know this word, and also some of you may also know what we did in the last summer of 2022. So this term of lumbung is really compatible, if we call it as a software, really compatible. Tawassujat and lumbung is two terms which are compatible each other, and I'm pretty sure it can be installed in any hardware. No virus, no firewall, no barriers. So when we want to discuss about the origin of collective in Indonesian context, and then it will come later to explain how Ruangrupa has been working up until now. That the term collective itself is very new in our context as an art practices. Even in 50s, the term collective was used by a political party. It was used by the political party that are still around today in the Indonesian political universe. And this term collective is then used by the art practices maybe not more than 15 years from now. So even Ruangrupa, when it was started, we call it initiative rather than a collective. So what terms that are part of the consciousness of the cultural practitioners or art practitioners? There are many terms when it comes to working together, and something like tawassujat. Lumbung is one of them in there, but we had musyawarah, we have musyawarah, we have silaturahmi. I'm pretty sure some of you are aware with these two terms, musyawarah and silaturahmi. and also mufakat. And then what are the best part of this term of musyawarah is that it used tamarbuta. It's a feminine form of Arabic word, which is really interesting to elaborate more when it comes to art and cultural practices. So and the term silaturahmi, the term silaturahmi is also really widely used, even though the word is coming from the Arabic word, and then most of the time when it comes from the Arabic word in Indonesian context, it will be associated with Islamic tradition, which is like the term musyawara and silaturahmi is not only used by the people who are embrace Islam as the religion, but it's used also by any by our friends, brothers and sisters, that embrace religions like Catholic, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Confucianism. For your information, Indonesia as a state recognized 6 religions, including Islam, but also recognize the tradition and the belief that which are part of the archipelago before the arrival of the Abrahamic religions, and this is really interesting to elaborate and to discuss more what are the notion of curatorial, what are the notion of the art practices we do when we want to discuss what Ruangrupa is. Would you please to show the links of we don't have many messages today, but these are the websites that we have. So if you go to, would you click the flags and then go to the English? No, still the Ruangrupa one, yeah. So if you go to tentang or about, yeah. If you go to about, yeah, there it is. So this is one of it is. I think this is Ade's image on when we had a meeting, and then sometimes when we have meetings, we just talk and then drawing, and then that's how we share. I think this is part of the drawing we made when we discussed about Lumbung in the early 2019. Would you scroll down? Yeah, more. So yeah, it will be easily to find in our website what Ruangrupa is, the explanation when it was started, and then how it's going to be the 25th years of Ruangrupa next year, and the next year will be a quarter of century of Ruangrupa's with its practices. And we are preparing something for this anniversary next year, that we are going to go to Kalimantan, an island, one of the islands in Indonesia that is also maybe you know that Indonesia is a country with 17,520 something islands. I tried to calculate if anybody want to spend to visit all these islands in Indonesia, they need around 48 years, one island, one day. So yeah, it's a very heterogeneous. It's a very heterogeneous culture, and it's a very heterogeneous social, cultural, and political context. So yeah, this explains what Ruangrupa is, all the activities, and yeah, you can go further there. I mean, you can see the menus there, but also if you are interested, you can go to the Documenta 15 if you are interested to see it. And one thing is really the reason why we really like Ruangrupa is that anyone in Ruangrupa can start anything else somewhere else, but we are still supporting each other. We are still supporting each other in terms of we really support anybody's initiatives. Like some of us, we started something else, somewhere else, based on our context. If you go to Ruangrupa, the next website, this is the initiative. If you go to, this is the initiative we started in Makassar. I was born and raised in a different island, in Sulawesi Island, and then I moved to Jakarta in 2005. But after having family, coming home and then commute between Jakarta and Makassar, and in my hometown, I started this initiative called Ruangrupa. If you go to the about, and this is the explanation. It's in English and also, yeah. That's the, and then we are still. Everyone in Ruangrupa, we have our own personal project somewhere else. But, and then, as I said before, we still keep on supporting each other. Because we know that by only supporting each other, we will grow together. That's one of the reasons why we can sustain up until now, because of we consider the support here doesn't mean always, yeah, money can fix everything, but the most important thing is the time to listen to each other, the time to listen to each other, the time to providing space, because for us that any ideas need space and roofs. Any ideas need space and roofs. That's the reason why that spaces and roofs are very important in our context. And the space and roofs are, we are struggling, actually. We are struggling. In the beginning, like Ruangrupa, Ruangrupa has been struggling to establish its own space up until there was enough. There is a very interesting concept in Islam called rizki. This rizki is a, we call it, it's not a reward, but it's something that you can only get it if you try to find it. So you're not going to have it like, no one will come to you and give you something and then offering you grant and everything, but it's supposed to be that something you are trying to find. You are trying to find this concept of rizki is very interesting in our context. And then, yeah, after some time, after we got rizki, and then Ruangrupa can purchase its own property, but Ruangrupa is not alone as an initiatives or collectives in the Indonesian context, but there are hundreds of initiatives and collectives throughout the archipelago which are struggling which are struggling to have its own space and roofs to keep on continuing the activities, and then to keep on experimenting the notion of art. And like now there are, after 2022, as you may also know that Lumbung is continued somewhere else. Lumbung is continued somewhere else as a platform. And then in the Indonesian context itself, we have Lumbung Indonesia. We have Lumbung Indonesia where there are many initiatives throughout the archipelago is part of this platform, which we think is more interesting to develop in our own context, because Lumbung itself, like Tawasujat, is our DNA. It's a flesh and bones in our. It's flesh and bones in our life. So that's actually the thing that I want to say today, that in our context nothing is fixed. Nothing is fixed in terms that it can be brought into something else or somewhere else. Depends when it will be compatible to be brought to or to practice. Or the most important thing is to deserve to, to deserve to practice or to apply. And since the remaining time is 11:41, I think I stop here and then let's continue to discuss later. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, all of you. And I just want to check what is our remaining time? 45 minutes. Okay, so maybe we can have a discussion together, and there is a lot to take in, and I just want to commend you. There is so much that is not legible. Like there's so much, when you're so many people and you're holding so many projects for as long as each of you have been holding it, there is so much kind of editing and labor that's needed to make it legible for others. So thank you so much for attempting to do this and doing it so well for all of us today. I think I could start with prompting a few questions, and I wanted to, put them out there for each of you to answer. And hi, Sofia, thanks for joining us. But yeah, I thought I could start off, and then hopefully there are some questions and we can have more of a conversation. I guess hearing and listening back to all of you, there's like there has been like an urgency, like a lot of the ways that each of your collectives formed was, in response to something and a need to be together. And I think a lot of it comes from political context or a lack of something in the institutions and structures that already existed, which, prompted you to kind of self-organize and start to develop a practice collectively. I kind of wanted to maybe start off like asking all of you about your experiences, being a collective, kind of having your own conversations, political kind of grounding for each of your projects, and then coming into contact with, which is often the case when we're working in the arts, with other institutions, getting funding from like state or institutions or arts contexts that are often, at odds in terms of their politics and their more hierarchical or author-oriented understanding of like what art practice is. And I'd love to kind of hear from each of you challenges or reflections on what it has been to be working within and against institutions in your own practices. Anyone can answer. Maybe you just press on.
Hello. Sorry I was late. I just arrived from the airport, and I'm very happy to be here sharing with Amelie and Deniz and with all of you. Perhaps to address your question, our collective emerged from a very specific political context, which was, well, as Deniz said, we studied in London. And for the past years, there has been protests every year in London and other cities in England because of the privatization of public university. So the year we were studying, half of the semester was interrupted because of protests. So there was a really important shift. Before we were studying in the context of the rooms, and then the learning environments became really the pubs, or were outside because we were not part of the process. Protest was not going inside the school. So I think that kind of very specific neoliberal privatization of school, and also just as they were mentioning, that we ask what do we desire and what are we missing from the kind of university context, and our collective emerged as a response. Now we live in different contexts, and those contexts have very contrasting material, economic, political conditions, and this always comes through our conversations. I think in the case of Costa Rica, and hearing him, I think there's a lot of resemblances. Collectives struggle a lot. They struggle for roof too, for economies, for funding. Fundings have a lot to do with a development discourse, for instance. But there's a lot of resilience and a lot of creativity in our context. So I think these kind of exchanges always come through I think that's one of the richness that we are a collective, a transnational collective, and that's why we emphasize this.
Thank you. Yvette?
Yes, I think I touched a bit. Maybe now? Working? Yeah. I think I touched upon a bit when I was talking about Kunsthalle and how... No? Okay, so this one is... Okay, I think I touched upon that a bit when I was talking about Kunsthalle and what it meant for us to, one thing was to work with institutions, like for example when we did the show in Reina Sofia or when we did the Istanbul Biennial, that was working with the institution, and not every institution is the same. For example, working with Reina Sofia when Manolo Borja was director was one of the best experiences, because this is how he ran the institution and the team, and then working with Istanbul Biennial was very difficult. So it really depends on. But then another completely dynamic became when we became an institution. That was very stressful and very, very kind of a new challenge for us as a collective, personally, emotionally, affectively, in every respect. Again, it's hard to say, what would have been in the long run. Obviously, there was a resistance because after 5 years, our contract was not prolonged. So there was a resistance from the institution itself. There is something that it says, institutions tends to say, but we always did it this way. This is the first answer. We always did it this way. And then you have to say, but we want to be more generous, more open. We want to do things differently. And then there is a resistance from the city, and not only from the city officials, but also from the certain parts of the conservative artistic communities as well, which expect a big institution like Kunsthalle to be very representative, to show only superstars, to really do like what is called a mainstream program. So you have different kinds of resistances, and you have to negotiate it on different levels constantly. And it's not an easy task, and there is no kind of, right answer. I think we managed in terms of programming. I'm very proud at what we did. In terms of the institution itself, I think the institution actually even went, we moved it into one direction and it went even further back in terms of how it works, no? So these are also very strange things that you can sometimes work, do a really progressive, what you think a very progressive program, but it doesn't really happen in the progressive art working circumstances, and it's a bit hypocritical even, no? So you really have to kind of push back and forth all the time.
Yeah, I was really struck by when you were saying that there needs to be like a connected art ecosystem supporting these kinds of challenges. And maybe I think as more collectives come in, I think Ruangrupa, you did so much work actually for collective practice, actually for the whole art, thank you so much for actually presenting and centering the possibility of what like a collective process can be in like the heart of like maybe the most conservative parts of the art world. And yeah, I think there were lots of challenges you faced there, but I don't know if you wanted to make any comments about that process or processes that you face in Jakarta, or like, this idea that you were saying about grounding Ruangrupa and like, not waiting for the risk to fall on you.
Thank you for mentioning about the keyword grounding, because that's also where we come from. That's we really coming from, really from the ground, really from the scratch when it was started, as well as many initiatives in Indonesia. So we have a term called modal dengkul. Dengkul means the knee. The knee is the main mode of production. It means that if you can still move and then talk to people, so it means that you can still do something. So and then not many. I think most of the initiatives are are doing the same. They're just hanging out, and then let's start this, and then that's how it is. That's how it started. And many, like Ruangrupa, when it was started in 2000, we thought that, okay, maybe it's only will be a year, and then we'll stop after a year. But then people are still keep on hanging out, and then people are still talking, and then also the reason why people keep on talking, because of the other people are like to listen to people talking. So yeah, I think it's a matter of compatibility. It's a matter of compatibility. It's not compatible if you keep on talking and then people don't like to listen to you talk. So yeah, it's a matter of compatibility. And then our society really reflects that. Our society really reflects that. And then when it comes to support, the support mostly coming from the ecosystem. I don't want to mention network, because network sometimes doesn't work if it's only net. So if it's only net there, also it doesn't work. I want to call it as a ecosystem. Yeah, ecosystem is there's an echo there. There's an echo there. So and also this ecosystem that we've been trying to experimenting last almost 25 years is the ecosystem of supporting system among us, supporting system among us, among us as friends. So, for example, many people starting to hang out in Ruangrupa or Riwanwa. Riwanwa just started a couple of years ago, and then Ruangrupa was started in 2000. But the model is the same. The model is the same. There are many people, like in Riwanwa context, like the same with Ruangrupa. Many people came just to find a roof to sleep, because, for example, they don't have enough. They don't have enough capacity, or they don't have enough money to pay the rent. But then we provide the supporting system for anyone, including to sleep, not only for 1 or 2 or 3 days, but not only for weeks and months, but can be years. So many people came to Ruangrupa to hang out at the first time, sleep for 1 or 2 days, and then that's how they are part of Ruangrupa for 25 years up until now. And then this is really reflecting, we in Indonesia, that in 2000, during the launching of Riwanwa in 2000, the launching of our space, because finally in 2021, Riwanwa finally has a space, comparing to Ruangrupa, who have been having their space from 2000s. But then Riwanwa finally have our own space in 2021 in Makassar. And then we invited some of our friends to discuss about how their house, their really living house, become a hub for their friends. Like in any cities in Indonesia where there are universities or there are schools, there must, in a circle of friendship, there must be a house where everyone coming together to practice tawasujat, to really practice tawasujat. Sometimes, like, and then sometimes this living house is a house of where parents also live, the other relatives lives, and then they are welcoming the friends of their son and daughters to not the term stay, because stay can be temporary, like 2 or 3 days, but to live. Yeah, to live for months and years. And then for me personally, I started to experience this when I was in Islamic boarding school. I went to Islamic boarding school for 6 years, and then sometimes we skip classes out of the boarding school, because we also want to see the other world. And then we skip classes, get out of the boarding school for 1 or 2 days, and then, or 3 days or some weeks, and then we always have a friend who their houses are around the boarding school, where become like a headquarter. We call it headquarter. We call it headquarter, where we hang out hours and hours, weeks and weeks, and then, but then this culture is continued up until we go to senior high school. We move to the big cities, like in Jakarta or in Makassar, and then there is always these houses of, it becomes a hub where I try to find this culture in other places, but in some places or some countries, it's only a place for families.
Right.
But in Indonesian context, it sometimes, no, most of the time, it doesn't have anything to do, not relatives, not part of your family or relatives, but just friends. Because if you are already close and then being part of the peer group, and then that's how the chemistry is blended, and then any houses can be turned into headquarters.
Yeah. I mean, I really feel that like that's somehow in the absence of this like culture of these kind of houses of gathering, it's like these gatherings around an idea, or like you said, you know, you first met one of your collective like because they were into the same politics as you were sitting for an exam together. But I'm thinking about like so many of you mentioned the idea of friendship, and I was feeling a lot of relief actually when you were sharing your guidelines for what it is to work together, like no homework and forgiveness about not turning up to meetings. And I felt so much relief there, and this idea that it's like a constant conversation, and it is about compatibility and that energy. And I think about collective practice so much as like, also as a way to challenge like the forms of relating that we're like asked to start doing with each other in terms of how we work together, or what it means to be a curator, work in a museum, or how you work with communities. And there's these like very strange like forms of relation that is devoid of this idea of friendship or love or care and things like that. And I think that for me starts to remove this element of what you need for collective practice, which is trust, and like this idea that you need trust and time. I wanted to ask you all about that, and about this idea of stamina and time and connection.
I think like in every relationship, I mean, you need trust and you need to work on relationship as well. I mean, four of us being together for 25 years, it wasn't always great, no? It was also, we had bad times too. So it's, I think this is, but also I think there was a bit of a defiance in wanting to stay together. Collective is still a bad word in all of the former Yugoslavia because of the legacy of, you know, socialism. And we consciously decided to use the word collective because sometimes people would also ask us, are you really a collective? You know, collective means many different things, very tight kind of relationship. And yes, we really wanted to, we stick to our guns saying, yes, we are a collective of 4 women and we want to keep doing that. And then, yes, I mean, we became friends. A couple of instances in the last couple of years also made me realize that we're more than friends. We're a bit of a family already. I mean, 25 years, it's a lot when you share, like, we do things on the side, but not that much. Basically, in terms of what we do, our projects, our financial sustainability, personal one, we really depend on each other for like quarter of a century now. So yes, we have become each other's family as well, not only friends. Yes, we don't spend holidays together anymore, no? but we are very, very close.
I mean, we often ask this question to each other, like, how does this friendship or the way we work together allow us to, what does it teach us about our other working relationships within institutions and in our individual practices, because we also have quite like separate practices, and also we're all kind of part of, we work with other collectives or we work on collectivity in different ways. So we try to sometimes, like when trying to understand like what is the friendship, like how is it different than other ways of relating to people or working with people, we also see it as a tool that helps us understand our needs that are not necessarily met in other settings, and how can we take aspects and elements of this way of doing curatorial work and try to apply it to other settings. So I think it's also kind of how to take these like tools and resources that the friendship or the collective provides us with, and to apply that to our other sort of relationships and working relationships.
Yeah, you mentioned the word trust. Yeah, trusting here doesn't mean that we trust people because they can do the right things, but also we trust them to make mistakes. So when they make mistakes, and then okay, that's what we call experimentations. Because when you experiment over something, and then we always allow any not only the right things, not only how to discover or to invent some things, but also to find or to make mistakes along the way. So that's the most basic reason the stamina is kept on going. The stamina is kept on going because of we don't really see that we don't really see that energy is binary opposition, like good and bad. There's a bad energy, there is a good energy. We don't really see that energy is a binary. Energy is energy. That's it. That's it. No binary opposition in terms of energy. And that's the reason why we believe that unconditional trust is one of the reasons why we can sustain up until now. And then we believe that we can sustain more years to come because of this. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I wonder maybe I can start to open up if there are any questions from the audience. I think there'll be a microphone moving around. No? Oh, yeah. There's one there.
Thank you all. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
So these are two questions which I don't see them related yet, but they might become related. One was to the members of Topsoil, which is, you all mentioned that you're doing PhDs right now, and I'm kind of wondering how within individual academic work you kind of lay a kind of a trail back to your collective work. So in terms of the institutional setting of a PhD, maybe is there an encouragement from the institutions you're doing that PhD in to do that, or is there a sense of you have to kind of do it yourself to kind of like even like a code to each other and to your publics that even an individual PhD is actually a collective project? The other question is about for both WHW and for Ruangrupa, when you work for these institutions that fail you, do you ever feel in terms of archive of actually taking away because the institutions of Documenta and this Kunsthalle kind of go backwards, right? They've gone backwards. And so when they fail, do you often think, putting Documenta 15 still up there on your website, maybe, you mentioned like putting a number 1, is there a sense of like to retreat by not indulging the institution when it doesn't, when it fails? So to actually kind of create your own memory of that experience that doesn't depend on the institution getting credit when it ultimately failed.
Should I go for the first question? Yeah, so in terms of the PhDs, I think it's very interesting because it really has re-entered our discussion about like the university, knowledge production system. And so for all of us, it's very different. But one thing that we all say is that, coming together in our meetings is really like we kind of gain certain like sense of boldness through our conversations, because we kind of agree on each other, like how important it is what we find out about collective work and about like our needs, so that we are like feel bolder to bring that back into our university settings. And for me personally, like I do my PhD in a German academic setting, and I have like colleagues who are also doing a PhD, and it's really tough, first of all, to explain them what I'm doing outside of the university, and even like bringing back in certain insights that I have about collective work to my colleagues, because there's such a strong understanding of a PhD as an individual work. But yeah, I'm working on it.
I mean, maybe just to add to that, because for me it's a bit more a gray area, because I am writing my PhD on my collaborative curatorial practices, topsoil being one. It's a practice-based PhD, so it was actually a quite interesting ethical debate that we've had in the university, because I am writing about these things that we're doing all together, and then at the end of the day, I also get a PhD degree with it, which I think like I kind of had to make some changes within the department, because they were like, how does collective practice can turn into an individual piece of writing? And I was like, this is exactly what I find interesting about it and why I want to write it. So I think we're, like for me, I think, and Sofia, maybe you want to add there, but I know that she's also writing a lot about collectivity. So I think like both our practices, topsoil, and the question of collaboration, collectivity, and how to fit that into these like quite fixed, rigid institutional academic settings is also part of our, I think, also more theoretical interest. And yeah, so it's not that separate from the practice component, I would say.
I think in my case, the university is still quite traditional, but I think, as Amelie was saying, this boldness and this understanding of how important collectives are, I still find ways of bringing that back into my research. So my research is about Central American collectives, and collective work in Central America is really important because of this kind of fragility of more institutional, established infrastructure. So even though perhaps this kind of collective voice doesn't enter that much into the research, I am still trying to meet and gain knowledge of how collectives really thread the ecosystem that we have at home.
Thank you for your question. You're right when you mentioned about the archive. It's an archive, so it will be now. It's in our website. It's in the main menu, but soon it will be moved to the archive, because there is a main menu also archive. So, and also you mentioned about Lumbung One. Yeah, some people call it Lumbung One, but then okay, I think it's not a good. It's not bad. It's not bad to call it Lumbung One, as well as now we're preparing the second Lumbung. Now we're preparing Lumbung 2, somewhere else, of course. And then we don't, when you mention about when I mention about compatibility, so as any software, like when you try to install it, and then that's the reason why we don't really see that there is a clash of civilization. What we always see there is the clash of system. Yeah, that's why we call it ecosystem, not the clash of network, but we call it, yeah. What was happening was a clash of system. Yeah.
I don't really have an answer to that question yet. I mean, we're still there, and we have to figure out, how, beyond, of course, documenting the program and having the publications and everything. This is one of the first reflections that I have and that we have on what happened and how it happened. We will see. We will see. I don't know.
Hi everyone. So I was really interested by what you said, Mirwan, about how the word collective has entered certain spaces at different points of time, and I was wondering about this particular time where an interpretation of what collective work is or what collectives are is more. The rhythm of it entering these conversations is more frequent. And at the same time, some of you guys have been working or practicing this way of working for 20, 25 years. I'm wondering how that rhythm or that sort of, maybe in some sense demand, from your practices, how has that changed the way that you have worked? In a sense that, do you feel a certain, do you feel that there is a requirement of a certain rhythm that you have to practice in right now because of the familiarity in which, or the sort of inclusion in which collectives that you have been part of is entering the conversation more and more frequently?
I can say it very quickly. I mean, I'm sorry to say I'm old enough to have seen a couple of waves of collectives being in fashion and then again not, no? But it doesn't matter. I mean, and also personally, I mean, everybody sees it as in the art world. I think you have these waves of interest in you and then less interest in what you do, and you have to find a way to really have your own program and your own things that really drive you, so that you do things that interest you, that drive you, and that you find important in your grounding and in your local community, whether you are getting international calls or not, because you don't always get them. No, there are years when we work only in Zagreb, and it's okay, because we know what we need to do in Zagreb and what Croatia and Balkans really need, or at least we think we know what Balkans need, no? And we try to do what we feel it's needed at that moment there.
Yeah, you're asking about is there any changes over time since it was started? Yeah, of course, especially when it comes to working with the generation. This is Indonesian context. When we work with the generation who actually don't experience the authoritarian regime. It's totally different. It's totally different approach that we need to how to present history, how to present the history, and then how to share the histories that we experience to generation that don't really face it or don't really see it. So what they, and we don't want to talk, for example, when we talk to Gen Z, for example, let's just don't talk about what's happening in 50s or 60s. Let's talk about 10 years ago. It's totally 10 years ago can be really different point of view to see it, and then it can be reflected in many ways. It can be reflected in many ways the way we work on, for example, like maybe if before we organize video festival in the National Gallery with all those screens and also with all video submitted from all around the world, but then maybe it's not relevant anymore for today to come to a National Gallery and then see all these screens and then being part of a so-called artwork. Maybe, yeah. And I'm pretty sure we all know how to deal with these things. That when we work with the generations, which I'm pretty sure, like my parents' generation, our preferred generation, also think the same when we deal with our generations. So of course we've been evolving into, and then that's also the beauty of being Ruangrupa or collective, because not a single experimentation is always take. Everyone has its own experimentation based on their experience, and then let's see, and then put everything on the table, and then we pick up one or two or three that are relevant to what we want to do. Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe one really tiny question. Small question. Any? Okay, in that case, maybe. Oh, there is. Okay.
Hello. My name is Sandhya Singh. I'm from India. I'm an artist, a painter. My style is called rhythmism because I paint rhythm and harmony in my paintings. And when people see my works, they say, oh, we feel so peaceful seeing these works. So now my question is that I want to take it to the global level. I have already done in some countries and very well appreciated. But my vision is to show it in each and every big or small countries. So people can see and feel happy. So can I get some support because alone is not easy. So I'm looking for somebody who can tell me how to do it and how to go about it and basically some support. If it is okay. I hope I'm not asking for too much.
No, Satya, thank you for your question. And maybe we can speak to you after and think about ways to connect you also with different groups and contexts and
Breakout.
yeah, and networks that work, that aren't nets. But I just want to say thank you to all of you, to Topsoil, to Ruangrupa and Vaheve, for all of the work you do and for kind of sustaining this like truly, actually emancipatory practice. I think in the art world there's a real liberal way everybody uses language of liberation, and actually it's actually a practice. So thank you for doing that and being models for all of us. Please join me in thanking the speakers today.